Hi everyone, here's the Book Chemist once again, and today I'm reviewing We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, the most Kafkaesque work of fiction I've ever read outside actual Franz Kafka, although even that definition is very reductive of what Castle actually is. Castle feels like a perfect diorama, a perfect model world with this mansion where the protagonist, her sister and her uncle live, and the village just close by. This dreadful place where everybody is hostile to the narrator, to the protagonist, Merricat, where she has to go twice a week to get food and get books, and where every step is torture, every human experience, every piece of human interaction is a miniature hell. And the reasons behind these difficulties that Merricat encounters in the book, the background to this strange dynamic between the house and the village, and the consequences of a few actions that occur in the course of the novel, are mysteries that will stay with you throughout the reading and long beyond. The best thing by far about Castle is its unsolved mysteries, which doesn't mean that the novel doesn't give you closure. If anything, the novel gives you a pretty neat and surprisingly satisfying ending. So, this Kafkaesque element I talked about, a little bit like in Kafka's stories or novels like The Metamorphosis or The Trial. In here, it's not quite clear what the reasons behind the protagonist and the main character's predicament are. There is a tragedy in the history of this mansion, a rather massive, horrific series of occurrences that will be revealed in the course of the book. It's here more than ever, it's so difficult to talk about Castle without spoiling you the novel, because the novel's game of anticipations and revelations and the ways it shines a light on events to come and events in the past, it's just a masterful display. It's just a masterwork, and the way it conveys this information is sheer crystalline perfection. But I was saying, there is this event in the history of the mansion, but even beyond that, there is a sense that the village never really liked the house, that this hate and this bad blood and bad vibes are rooted much deeper in the nature of this setting and are lost even beyond recent history and beyond the protagonist's life. A lack of understanding is central to this Kafkaesque note, as is the idea that characters in this sort of fiction tend to be stuck in their predicaments and in their lives without it being that apparent why exactly they go about the things they do, why exactly they are stuck in these cycles of self-harm and obsession. The clearest example of this in the novel would be Uncle Julian. This old man at the end of his life is ill, is confined to his room and to a wheelchair. He can only take very little delicate food, and he is constantly obsessed with these events in the family's past that doomed the house and doomed his family, and constantly relives them and constantly talks about them. At the opposite end, you have Constance, Merricat's sister, her beloved sister, who instead tries to have a cheerful approach and to ignore the morbidity surrounding her and to focus instead on hard work and on trying to do the best, to live the best possible life, focusing on keeping the house clean, focusing on cooking nice food for Merricat and for Uncle Julian, and to be as much of a positive presence as she can. All of this is exceedingly disconcerting, and the sheer sense of what the hell is even going on and the sinister aura of Castle is really difficult to convey. Just as the best of Kafka's fiction, Castle feels a bit like a nightmare, as a certain oniric quality of, again, impending doom, I would say, and inescapability that moves it forward so very fast. It's a short novel. You are going to read it, I'm positive, within a few sittings, but at the same time it does feel very much like a novel. For all that this diorama I was talking about is so contained, it also contains multitude, and maybe because its mysteries are so vast, the scope of the book goes well beyond its thinness and its diminutive size. At the same time, as it is a dream nightmare narrative of that sort, Castle is also a sort of fantastic tale, although this fantasy is very subdued throughout the book, and mostly comes from the fact that you see the world through Merricat's eyes, and Merricat is obsessed with witchcraft and with spells, and comes up with all of these magic formulas to try to keep this inevitable doom at bay. And obviously we have to wonder how much of this world that we see recreated comes from our own perspective of it. And what we have throughout Castle is a beautiful game where Merricat's description of this world, of the house and the village, help you understand what sort of traumas she faced and what sort of difficulties her psyche encounters in her quotidian interactions with other people, with objects, with difficult situations, while at the same time you use her manias and her traumas to try and get a better understanding of this world around her. These two dimensions, the fantastical and the oniric, are very perceivable in Castle, but the third dimension, the most prominent one possibly, and the one that makes it such a masterpiece, because it shouldn't work at all with those other feelings, is the sheerly realistic, straight-up psychological novel aspect of Castle. Castle is a study of a few characters who have faced extraordinary circumstances and whose minds have been altered forever by those circumstances. You get the feeling in Castle that everything you are reading is happening and feels horribly familiar and horribly believable, at the same time as it all feels like some kind of fairy tale or even a dream. The next part of this video is only for people who have read the novel, because I will be talking about the plot. I can't continue talking about the book without touching upon it and even spoiling the ending. If you haven't read the book, please stop now and by all means go and read We Have Always Lived in the Castle. It's a fantastic novel. It's a masterpiece. For those who have read it, I guess possibly the greatest mystery in the book, and possibly the one that contributes the most to this nightmarish aura, is why in the hell doesn't anybody suspect Merricat? Although Merricat is so obviously the murderer. She is obsessed with poison, she's very vindicative, she is obsessed with her own sense of importance and with punishing everybody who she sees as her enemies. It's kind of clear throughout the book. I assume that she wouldn't be revealed as the murderer because it was just so obvious. And instead she is. And the fact that nobody quite figures it out almost excludes her from the entire book, until Charles comes into the scene. And Charles can be read a little bit, without going too psychoanalytical, can be read a little bit as this normalizing impulse that tries to solve, in a very brutal, very manly, very let's get things sorted, tries to solve the problems within this house and tears the house down in the process. Until Charles comes into the scene, nobody really seems to notice Merricat within the house, or her strangeness, or her quirks, or the fact that she, smashes china where she's unhappy and buries treasure all over the place. In fact, Uncle Julian is convinced that Merricat is dead. What did you make of that? What did you make of this great mystery? And by all means, please try not to make it as spoilery as possible when we talk about this stuff in the comments. I don't want to ruin the book for other reasons. Other great mysteries that I found impossibly compelling. What is up with Constance and Charles? I feel like something happened between them. I think like a budding love or some kind of seduction game is going on in the course of the book, especially seeing how the relationship is solved. What's up with Constance more specifically? I got the feeling throughout the book that for all that Merricat's manias and psychoses and neuroses are very clear and to the front of the book, Constance might be even more scarred and even more traumatized from the poisoning and the trials she had to sustain, and her constant denial of what's happening around her feels like an even stronger way of shutting out reality than Merricat's magic and games. Constance most notably sustains Merricat's illusion of still being a child. In the first chapter, when Merricat is going through the village, I got this image in my mind of her as a young woman. I believe she's 18 in the book. But then from the second chapter onward, where most of the action moves to the mansion, in my mind Merricat suddenly changed back to a younger version of herself. In my mind's eye, I imagined her as a 12-year-old child, the age she was when she murdered everyone. And I get the feeling that Constance is preserving this idea, is definitely feeding Merricat's own wish to forever remain a bit of a child enamored with fairy tales and with just running wild in the garden and most notably being alone away from the world of grown-ups. The novel's genius indeed is that Jackson is very good at showing on the one hand how this wish of Merricat and of Constance of keeping the world at bay is sick and diseased and denotes neurosis and really strong traumas just beneath the surface of their psyche, while at the same time also showing how it's quite a compelling wish. If I lived near a village like that, I probably would also like to just stay home all day and hang out in the forest and never see any of those fuckers. The final mystery worth mentioning is why the village hated the Blackfoots so much. It's very clear from Uncle Julian's reflections about his family, from a few conversations in the book, that the Blackwoods were horrible people. Merricat's family, her father in particular, her extended family, were quite venal and quite petty and the worst kind of rich assholes. But at the same time, it's never quite understood why the village at large has this atavistic almost hate of the family and of the mansion. It clearly goes beyond the murders and then the poisoning. We Have Always Lived in the Castle is brilliant in the way it conveys its plot and describes and unfolds this damaged reality and describes how these traumatized lives are affected by the horrors of the community around them, by the intrusion of this violent, brutal world, and yet maintain their integrity and manage to continue and to persist in spite of all that. What did you think of the ending, by the way? I loved the ending. I've heard it described by Joyce Carol Oates in the afterword to The Penguin's Addiction as a little bit unexpected and almost too good, as in it definitely is. It feels like a fairy tale ending. After that dreadful scene where the house is burning, I surely wasn't expecting it. And yet I think it's the perfect way of closing this diorama of basically putting some kind of glass bell and glass dome on top of this crystal world, on top of the village and the house, and turning it and almost petrifying it with the same magic spells that Merricat has been using throughout the book to try to keep the world at bay. I really loved We've Always Lived in the Castle. What did you think about it? I look forward to discussing it in the comment section. Thank you so much to my patrons for sponsoring my channel, for supporting the channel, and thank you so much to you for watching the video. I will see you in a next review or video, and bye guys.